Hello and welcome to the Mind Detox podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Newbigging. I'm a trauma-aware therapeutic coach and meditation teacher known for unifying therapy and spirituality, and I'm the author of 12 books, including New Beginnings, Mind Calm, and Mind Detox. I've also been teaching my insights and techniques via my award-winning academy for almost 2 decades. For this podcast, I usually share extracts from my Calm Clan community webinars. I'm also sometimes joined by guest experts for the occasional chit-chat. All so you can heal the hidden causes of anything problematic going on in your life, and so you can access more peace and enjoy the best life possible. I've been a monk and had to get myself out of a spiritual cult. I have a busy clinic with lots of fascinating clients, stories and takeaways. I'm usually creating a course or writing a new book, and I'm on my own journey of healing and knowing myself. So thank you for joining me for this episode. You never quite know what you're going to get, but I hope you get a lot from listening. And without further ado, let's begin. It's a beautiful topic. It's a beautiful thing. Peace on earth. Just sit with that for a moment as we get into this. Peace on earth. It's something that I imagine many of us might want. However, there I go again with my howevers. The reason I thought, I could talk about that is because I've observed that peace on earth comes with many assumptions and misconceptions made up about it and around it, surrounding it. And these are often reflecting the assumptions and misconceptions that we can have about peace in life. So peace on earth and peace in life. I've seen a trend. The outer reflects the inner. How we're dealing with our world and relating to our world also links with how we're dealing with our life in a more micro environment or context. So I wanted to start by inviting you to consider some of the common assumptions that you make or other people make, the world we make as a humanity, around how peace is possible, first of all, in our life. Okay, so when you sit down with this grandiose goal of, I'd really like to have more peace in my life, what sort of assumptions do we often make? Now let's start with the obvious one. Peace in my life probably requires me to have none of this negative thinking and none of these negative thoughts that I'm aware have been bothering me, or a quiet mind, or even no thoughts at all. Peace in our life we can assume that we have to have no negative emotions. That's a very obvious one, but it's very common. If I ask someone, what do you feel stopping you, standing between you and peace? One of the most common things, they'll start telling me about their emotions. Well, I've got this anxiety, or I've got this insert negative emotion, and therefore I can't experience peace. Another assumption that we make, not you necessarily, but one can make, is that for me to have peace in my life, I can't be dealing with any physical conditions. I certainly can't be experiencing any physical conditions. And one of the most common ones, I'd say, is that nothing bad can really be happening in my life for me to have peace in my life. Nothing bad can be happening. Now, how we relate to our life, we often project out, and that becomes how we're relating to our world. The outer reflects the inner after all, right? So, what assumptions are you making about peace on earth? What kind of assumptions, what criteria What things you think really need to happen first that are the prerequisite of peace on earth? Now, let's start with the obvious. The thing you probably expect me to talk about most of all, if you saw the advert that said we're going to talk about peace on earth today. Do I believe that if we want more peace on earth, then we need to find peace within ourselves? Yes. You know, it's not like I'm not shifting away from that fundamental belief. Do I believe that if we were all peaceful, then we would have peace on earth? Well, yeah. I mean, come on. I mean, it's logical. It makes sense. If everyone had found peace in their hearts and they were experiencing peace, there would be much. It would just inevitably spill out into the earth that we are inhabiting and the interactions that we're having and the work that we're doing and how we're treating each other and earth, etc., etc. Okay, so it makes sense. However, there can be sometimes a little bit of a downside to that being our prerequisite to peace on earth. It can actually sometimes be disempowering. Why? Well, because we're now I'm now waiting for everyone else to get peaceful. There's a lot of people that have come and gone over the years and they didn't get peaceful before they went, you know? So I'm not sure if I want to rely on that strategy, you know? I'm not trying to be negative here, but do you get my point? Yeah. It can be devoid of reality, what's really going on and what's really required for a human life. And I'll come on to that in a bit. It's also inevitably highly conditional. It's dependent on circumstance and other people. And if we're really very honest, it might not happen in our lifetime. So, what are we going to do about that? There's a happy ending to this conversation, don't worry. But I want it to be a real and honest conversation. So, today I'm going to give an alternative, perhaps unexpected talk on peace on earth. We're going to explore two or three of the big assumptions that I see people making. And I'm going to give an alternative approach, an alternative perspective, an alternative way of engaging this, and see what you how you relate to what I'm sharing. I've taken a few notes. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to talk about it all or a bit of it or whatever. To be completely honest, um, as I as I tend to do many things, I'm winging it. But I'm pretty sure what needs to be said will be said, and we'll have a pretty fun time talking about peace on earth. But my hope and intention is that by the end of today's conversation, you might actually have a surprising amount of peace, or at least hope that peace is more possible for you than maybe a few minutes ago before we joined this conversation. And that's a pretty cool intention to have. So, shall we go for that? Shall we aim for that? So let's talk about one of the main assumptions. Assumption number one, and this is how I wrote it when I was taking my notes or making my notes. I can't have any negative emotions, and if I do, then there can't be any peace on earth. Okay? I can't have any negative emotions, and if I do, there can't be any peace on earth. All right? Well, don't get me started, but I'm going to get started a little bit, but don't get me started on this one long term. I want to go through some of the common negative emotions, and I'm going to actually argue for them for a bit. Oh my goodness. Some people's memberships are due in January and they're all going to unsubscribe after this conversation. I'm going to talk about why some of these common negative emotions that we are constantly fighting and trying to get rid of are actually possibly very, very necessary. So let's start with this old chestnut called anger. Yes, anger. Peace on earth. I'm a bad spiritual person and I'm making a terrible contribution to peace on earth if I ever get angry. Can we relate? Can anyone relate to that spiritual thought? Anger is necessary to have boundaries. Anger is necessary to protect and to stay safe. Anger is necessary often to create change, not just change, but to create stuff. You know, a good a cousin of mine, what is it, a cousin-in-law? I don't know what you call them, but one of the hundreds of cousins I got when I married into a Mexican family came round yesterday for breakfast, which they love to do here, long, long breakfast feasts. And he's a doctor. He's a surgeon. He's a great work specializes in bones and fixing knees and rebuilding things and stuff. And where how it works here is you're normally like a free agent surgeon or doctor, and you're working at multiple hospitals. So they call you in if they have a job for you or whatever. I know, and you end up working full time over the year or whatever. Well, he got sacked by one of his hospitals because they were taking advantage of people, and he circumnavigated it so that they couldn't take advantage, and they found out about it, and they sacked him. And he was pretty angry about it. But when we were talking about it, he was like, the last time this happened, I had the anger drove me to create a clinic of my own. And it's true. He's got a beautiful little, it's actually not so little, but he's got a clinic in town. It's really full and busy and productive. And he said that wouldn't have happened if this hadn't happened. So I'm wondering what's going to happen with this anger and this sacking. Does that make any sense? I've told you this story before, and I won't dwell on it. But this time last year, this time last year, I was sitting in a house over there, paying over $2,000 a month on rent, and the house was freezing because it had uh, terrible heating system, and it was just like draining money from the power we're having to have the heating on all the time, but also just from the rent and everything. But also, we'd been a year working with our architects at the time, and they really weren't getting the concept. I understand, we want a French farmhouse in northern Mexico. It's not really done here in Chihuahua very often. But the point I'm making is that we had to sack them. And I remember sitting there on a Sunday going, I let myself get angry. I let myself feel that frustration of a year, and then we just had to tear it all up to start again, trying to find new architects, etc. And I said to Christina, with this anger, you know what? We are moving out of here, whatever. I don't care if it means I have to buy a caravan and we move on to the land or whatever. And I use that energy to start like Googling mobile homes or these pop-up homes or whatever. It's use that energy, to like, and then within a day, Christina was just sharing the news with her father. And her father goes, "Oh, well, you never talked about that before, the idea of having a temporary place. But I was already thinking of building a cabin on the land, so I can just bring the plan forward." And right there, we went on to Google again, wonderful Google, and we found a printable off floor plan. We literally printed off a floor plan, no architects, nothing. It's a floor plan, printed it off onto A4 bit of paper. I promised you within 7 days the foundations were being laid. And we moved in March, and I'm talking to you from the house that didn't exist a year ago. And it's been amazing. Love it here. You should see out this window. I'm just looking out over mountains and stuff. It's phenomenal. But I know, and Christina completely remembers that moment as well. Like this came from the energy of anger. They say that Jesus turned the tables. Remember that old parable or scripture or story? It's somehow become stigmatized, especially in the world of mind, body, spirit, soul, spiritual stuff, that I should never let myself have that emotion. Now, am I saying you want to hold on to grudges? You want to have chronic anger? You want to be still angry X amount of time later about what that person did or whatever? No, I'm talking about natural arising anger in the moment. It has a very positive impact. Is that clear, guys? So if that if we negate that, if we are not allowed to experience any of that, then immediately, if we believe I can't have peace on earth and anger sometimes, you see where we're going with this? Guilt and shame. Now, I talk often about toxic shame and identity shame and stuff, that early life trauma and stuff. I'm not talking about that type of shame at the moment. That is unhelpful, unhealthy, and usually leads to a lot of stuff. I'm talking about the feeling of guilt or shame. You know, if you Google, or stop talking about Google, I should use other search engines are available, by the way, and are a bit more ethical potentially as well. But anyway, we're not going to go there. Um, if you research what a psychopath is, a narcissist, sociopath, often these things that we probably don't want to be, they all talk about how they have no shame. They can't feel shame. Either they have absolutely none or they can't. And so they project it out and they have to. So narcissists are more like the can't category. Sociopathic, etc. Psychopath is more about they they aren't able to. But shame and guilt, they're very powerful feedback loops for our learning and growth. For us kind of checking in ourselves and going, how I treated that person, what I just said, the thought of doing that, I'm not okay with that. So again, it's just a little example about how guilt and shame are actually necessary. Regret, kind of similar, but different. It informs us that the actions we did were not authentic or good for ourselves or others. You know, they all have that same guilt, shame, regret. They all have that kind of same feedback loop in common. It can also tell us that we've missed an opportunity. We overthunk something. You know, I regret, I really wish like I was about to buy XRP, a cryptocurrency, about 3 weeks ago when it was 40 cents. And now it's shot up to 140. And it's heading up more and more. I got the hit. I didn't buy it yet. I still will get it because I think it's going to go even further. But my opinion. But my point, that's not financial advice. But my point is, there's a bit like, oh, but I can use that to not delay or second guess or procrastinate in the future when I have the similar kind of hit. I can also use it to get off my ass and get some now, not just the future, but now. So for me, I think it can be a helpful. Any of this stuff chronically starts being problematic for our peace. It leads to more suffering, more health conditions, etc., etc. Okay, but there's a belief that there can be a belief in the moment that if I'm feeling something negative, I shouldn't, especially if I'm on a spiritual journey or whatever. But also in the greater context of peace on earth, the assumption we're talking about right now is I can't have negative emotions, and if I do, then there can't be peace on earth. I don't believe that by shutting off that spectrum of emotions is what's required to experience peace on earth. I'll talk about how in a minute. One last thing about regret I had in my notes. It leads to positive and helpful self-examination. It can really help to really good self-examination. And like I said, help us to make better, different decisions moving forward. Well, if I'm spiritual, then I have to be completely fearless. I can't have any fear whatsoever. That's not possible in a world where we have peace on earth. Well, Fear is actually another one of these necessary emotions. I'm not trying to be patronizing there, but it's a common one that is love or fear, and you're being driven by fear, and you should never be driven by fear, only love. Well, I'd say it's pretty good to be driven. If I'm completely honest, I wasn't completely fearless and far from it. I wasn't a finished article or item when I wrote my first book or my next book or the 12th book. I wasn't a finished fearless item, never experiencing any fear whatsoever. I'd be lying to myself and you if I said that was the case. But fear, and specifically for me, the fear of not making a difference, the fear of, I'm just talking and using words that I've used, living a pointless life that didn't have any impact whatsoever. That fear for me is actually very real and it actually does motivate me and it drives me. And if I don't say so myself, I believe I've done some good with that driver. There might be one or two people out there that say they've been helped a bit by the work I've done over the last 20 years. I don't mean to sound arrogant or anything, but I'm being honest. Like, I'm often written to, people write to me, it's really nice, and they go, hey, that's really helped me. I'm living a better life now, da da da. But if I'm honest, some of that producing and getting out there and doing things, it hasn't just been fairies and angels and unicorns and love. I just want to share peace with the world. Some of it is driven by a personal desire not to live a life that makes no difference. Does that make sense, guys? So I think the answer around, can I be, is it okay to be driven by fear? I'd say it depends. Sometimes when we're creating from fear, we create the fear, and that's not very useful. Does that make sense? But sometimes when we're creating from fear, we can actually create something good. True or false? Explore it for yourself. But it might let you off the hook. It might let you off the hook. Fear also informs our limits. If we had no fear, you might go and, I don't know, put your head in the oven or jump off a bridge or go up that street in the dark when fear says, actually, no. You could say intuition says that too, but it comes with a bit of fear potentially. That's the warning sign that says, oh, yeah, maybe I should listen to this intuition. It's not usually just a neutral intuition, a thought with no emotion. Does that make sense? It usually comes with some energy. So that's another time when fear is helpful. Am I saying be governed by fear? Being governed by fear and being driven by it sometimes is a very different thing, right? Am I saying be overwhelmed by it to the point that your life becomes very small and you stop doing things and getting out there and whatever? Of course not. I used to run workshops way, way back, fire walking workshops, way, way back in the day. I mean, I was a very fresh faced lad. Early 20s, I used to run fire walking workshops and we would build the fire and then it would take time to burn because it's a very big fire to build a fire walking pit to walk over. And I'd do them with my friend Bryce. He was actually the official firewalk instructor, but we'd team up and I would do more of the pep talk. He would do it as well, but I would contribute to it and make a bit of an event, an evening out of it, an experience out of it. Um, there's a couple of things that I'm just reminding of in this moment about that. Number one, I used to do this diagram on the whiteboard and I would ask people what their fears were, what there's, and we would do a little shark fin on the whiteboard. And then someone else would share a fear and they'd put another shark fin and another shark fin, another shark fin until the board was relatively, it had quite a few shark fins on it. But except the bottom left corner, at which point I would draw a little half circle around the edge, around the corner. And in that, I'd write your life. And that's what fear can do if we let it govern us and overwhelm us. All these scary things, these sharks swimming around, we can end up living in a very small bit of life. You know what I mean? From that perspective, that's not healthy fear. I don't believe that's necessary. I think you're here to live, for sure. Live fully and completely. But there's another thing that I've literally just been reminded of in this moment about the fire walking workshops is that when you stood in front of the fire, the message was you had to be 100% honest. There's that old chestnut again. We had to be 100% honest about where we were, where we wanted to get to, and what was between us and getting there. Okay. So you had to be clear on, I want to get to the other side safely, you know, with fully intact feet. All right. But we had to be honest about the fire. We had to be honest that it was. You put your hand over it when I was putting flattening it down so it was walkable. Um, I would lose the hair on the back of my arm. It's hot. It's not like a trick. You know, it's a genuine. You've sat there all night watching this fire burn down. It's very hot. You have to be honest about the fire, or in other words, in the context of fear, you have to be honest about the fear. You know, but most importantly, you have to be honest about how you feel. The line of thought from the Native American region, which was who taught Bryce, my friend, who was the firewalk instructor, they believed that when the noom of the body equaled the noom of the fire, you can walk safely. And what does noom mean in the language? Energy. When the energy of the body equals the energy of the fire, you can walk safely. And so what the instruction basically was that when you stood in front of this fire barefoot, just you and the fire and normally a starry night, you had to be fully honest about how you really felt. You could be scared, very scared. You could be super excited. You could be experiencing a lot of joy, whatever. But you had to breathe and let yourself feel it. You had to breathe and let yourself feel it. And when your energy rose up to meet the fire and you got the inner yes to walk, you'd walk. Incidentally, sometimes the most powerful thing to do on a fire walk would be to not walk if you got an inner no. And you could have gone through all that experience to do this fire walk and actually not do it. But it's one of the most powerful, empowering things to actually do. But it's just a little side note. Healthy boundaries teach us when to say yes and no, you know? Anyway, I digress a little bit talking about all that stuff, but hopefully you got something interesting from it. In the situation of a firewalk, you have to, if it's fear that comes up, you've got to really feel it, otherwise you can burn yourself. And I believe the same thing is in the moment, if some fear comes up, you have to feel it, or you might get burnt by whatever. Is this making sense so far? Are you having an interesting time on this peace on earth talk that you might not have expected? You might have expected me to talk about only outer reflects the inner and you must get peaceful yourself in order to do that. Well, I am saying that, but I'll get to that in a second. Another emotion that people are often recall from or have a problem with is grief. Grief. And I would say that grief is necessary. I'd also say that it's most likely in this lifetime inevitable and inescapable. Um, And for that reason alone, I wouldn't say it's therefore not a prerequisite to peace on earth. I think it's a natural part of being a human. In this world, if you really want to experience true and deep love, connection, and belonging, the flip side of that may be loss. You know, um, I know I don't know anyone that doesn't know someone that's died. You know, now some people shut down because of an initial loss and they try to numb themselves from it, but then that's a far worse situation because they're numb to life and they never really get to experience up or down, positive or negative. But it's one of these things, you know, if we want to experience deep love, then there's a chance there's going to be grief. But that's okay. Grief is not helpful again if it becomes chronic, but natural grief is incredibly healthy and healing. Natural grief that arises in the moment, not from overthinking and over reminiscing or whatever, but just natural grief arising can be very cathartic, very healing, very powerful. Um, but there's other benefits of grief that might be overlooked. You know, Christina last week or the week before just celebrated or acknowledged or whatever the 11th anniversary of her mum's death. Her mum died pretty young, or and when Christina was pretty young. And I was asking her about it last night when prepping for today, or you know, having just talking about what I was going to talk about today. And I said, "How did you feel last week?" And she said, "When I was sat at my mum's grave, I felt a very delicious combination of sadness and love. It's a very unique, alive, deeply connecting experience of sadness and love. But it's very alive. It's very alive." There was a point in my own journey where my definition of success and my definition of what I wanted to, how like, how do I word this? It stopped being about what happened and it started becoming much more about my aliveness during whatever happened. It became so obvious that so many people live and die without really, really living. They have a life, but they didn't really live. And for me, it's probably why I was drawn to a Mexican as a wife because there is that very similar philosophy. Um, it's about life, it's about extremes, it's about aliveness. And we can't do that if we numb ourselves to love, numb ourselves to loss. You know, I'm not going to be with anyone ever again because I might lose them. Or holding on to a love lost a long time ago can prevent us from having something that surpasses what we believe is possible today. I often say to people, you know, would the person that's passed want you to be really sad right now? Really like not doing stuff right now, not really living because you're holding on to them. What do you think the common answer is when I ask people that? Would the person that's passed want you to be suffering because of their passing and not really living? What do you think the answer is? Of course not. And many that I've said that to have said, you know what, I'm going to honor them by actually living. I'm going to honor them by squeezing every bit of life out of what I've got left. When faced with death, we are faced with our own mortality at the physical level. Grief, death, and dying and loss can also be a very powerful motivator to not only live fully and completely while our hearts are still beating, i.e., live with heart, but it can also be a motivator on the spiritual journey, the spiritual quest to find our eternal nature, our eternal self. It can give us energy, ironically, you know, it can give us energy. So, what I've been basically talking about so far today, that I only plan to spend about 10 minutes on and then move on to the next assumption, it, is this whole idea of these negative emotions. And a while back, when I was creating the Master Practitioner for Mind Detox course, which is now absorbed into the Camologist training, um, I created a whole directory about emotions, and I called it the Functions of Feelings directory. And what I was trying to communicate with that, I listed all the different negative ways we could feel, and actually said, but what if there was a positive intent with that? A way to, it's actually trying to be helpful. And I came up with a couple others, well, quite a few, but a couple I wanted to highlight today was feeling alone, for example. If we're feeling alone, what's the function of feeling alone? And to the point of, if you're alone and you're okay with it, great. I'm talking about when we feel alone, not often associated with loneliness. What is that? It's your heart. It's your heart talking. It's a calling. It's like the heart's just picked up the phone, and it's not a wireless connection. It's actually got a lot of nerve endings and stuff, and it's talking straight to the brain, and the brain's producing thoughts and feelings, neuropeptides, molecules of emotion. And what is that? It's a call to connect. It's a call to connect. Now we can get all sucked into the woe's me and the poor me and life's so unfair and blah blah, or we can get on getting going on answering that call. You know, easier said than done. If that sort of thought, your heart's calling, listen. It's a call to connect. It's a call to connect. Be creative. Figure it out. If your life depended on it, or I'll say it even more, more impactfully. If someone you loved, life cared, relied on it. If someone you loved and their life relied on you making that call to connect, you would do it in a heartbeat, most likely. It's a call to connect. It's not just, oh, I'm so lonely, I'm so alone. No, it has an intent behind it. Let's focus more on the intent, the function of it, the purpose of it. And then we get into a whole different place where actually we can answer that call. And when the emotion has been answered and you've heard it, you've listened, it naturally goes away. That feeling naturally goes away. It's not required anymore. Okay? But you're going to find that with all these negative emotions. When we fulfill the purpose for which they were born, they have lived their life cycle, they've done their purpose. So they naturally move on. So whatever negative emotions you're dealing with right now, whatever it might be, not right now, but in the next week or so, catch yourself and go, if this was a phone call, if it was like my body, mind, heart's way of Morse coding a message to me, what's the message? If I was to answer this, what would be the answer? I'm feeling really moody right now. Really moody right now. What's the point? What's the purpose and function of moodiness? Usually healthier boundaries. Healthier boundaries. So get on getting going, seeing how you can create that healthier boundary. And the moodiness will often just go because it was the purpose of it has been fulfilled. Sometimes moodiness can be space as well. We need our own space as well as we need loneliness. No, we don't like being alone all the time, but we also need our space. Oh, these human beings, we need to make our mind up. But that tells us that the emotion itself is not the problem. It's our relationship with it. And if we're answering it or not. I feel so worthless. What could be the purpose of that? I feel so worthless. Maybe it's because it's time for you to get a new way to define your worth. Maybe the criteria you're using to define your worth is not working for you. So you want to do some self-inquiry, self-examination. What criteria? What's my I'm worthy checklist? Literally, to make it really powerful for you, write your list and put a checkbox beside it where you would put a tick just to really see how ridiculous that is. That it's not right that you have to jump through these hoops to feel worthy. But feeling worthless can also be a call to get going with your purpose. It can also be a call to get going with your purpose or to get going with something. Get going with something. If you don't know what that is, get going with what you do know you can do today. Does that make sense? Ultimately, we are all innately worthy as we are, blah, blah. But that feeling that way can actually be a driver. It can actually be a call to action. It can be a call to actually get on, getting on. I think I might call this webinar that today. Get on, getting on. It's a really cool. I like that phrase. But you get my point. In summary of this first assumption, we need to be willing to experience these emotions and recognize their higher level purpose. And when we do, we stop suffering from them. We stop suffering from them. And our world that we're living in gains more peace. Peace is not the absence of problems. Peace is the absence of suffering. So the second assumption that we can make about peace on earth is I have to have peace in my relationships for there to be peace on earth. Now, this assumption is linked with the following common supporting beliefs. Number one, I should never feel frustrated by others or towards others or relating to others. I should never feel frustrated. Another belief supporting this assumption is conflict is always bad. Arguments should never happen. There should only be harmony in my relationship at all times. And you can never hear that normally. I don't know if the drum roll for the fourth one is I should never judge anyone. And if I'm judging someone, then I'm currently contributing to the lack of peace on earth. Geez, guys, that's a pretty big burden to carry. But anyway, I should always have peace in my relationships for there to be peace on earth. Well, let's just look at these just one by one. I haven't got notes here. I've just got the opening sentence. I should never feel frustrated by others. But here's the thing, frustration is feedback again. It tells us that there's something that you're not okay with. And the first step is for you to recognize that it's okay to not be okay with that. Now, is there something in it for you potentially? Yeah, there's many contexts to this. But the first thing is that it's okay to not be okay with something. Okay. One of the things we have to do a lot in therapy is rebuild people's needs and boundaries. When we've had early life trauma, we often surrender our needs and we become totally focused on everyone else's needs. And it's all about them, or where we have needs, we express these needs, but they aren't answered. So we eventually give up, or we're criticized or even punished for having our needs. And so we learn that I shouldn't have these needs and all that sort of stuff. So it's a very common thing that we need to work on in therapy. And one of the kind of beliefs that we need to put in there is I have unique needs. I decide what I need. I have unique needs. I decide what I need. Well, that doesn't sound very spiritual. Who's the I that's deciding that? Well, we do have needs, and you can get as spiritual as you want, but you probably all need to eat something today at some point. And you probably need to go pee at some point. Yeah, you probably need to put some clothes on to be warm at some point. If you need to read something or see something, some of you might need to put some glasses on in order to be able to read and see these things. Yeah. So, well, their physical needs, Sandy. Uh-huh. But define physical. Define physical. Human life is a physical thing, you know? It's incredibly physical. Just look at childbirth. Yikes. But anyway, that's a different story and conversation entirely. But when we get a bit ultra spiritual, we can get to the point where we're like, oh, I've heard about non-attachment and I should have no needs whatsoever. I should just be completely at peace with everything that's happening and not have any needs whatsoever. I should just might as well just live in a cave with nothing apart from occasional apple to eat to sustain myself or whatever. And to be honest, I tried that for a bit. It wasn't a cave, it was a retreat, but I only had an apple. Um, I got to eat once a day in the evening, and then but the rest of the day I was just starving, thinking I was spiritual. But I was just hungry. I was just hungry. We have needs. I have needs. It's okay to have needs. But there's many other needs that are okay for you to have. Yes, I'm not saying you get completely closed off and unwilling to compromise or never talk about things or grow or evolve beyond certain maybe needs that are not actually helpful for you in the long term or whatever. That's a whole conversation over there for a minute. Right now, we're talking about how if you're frustrated occasionally, that's all right. It's all right. Something might need said. Something might need to change. Now, if we're always having to change our external world, if we're always having to change other people so that we're happy, and there's this quote by Anthony DeMello that says, people come to him for help to experience more peace, etc. But he was so surprised to notice that most people were standing nose high in a septic tank of shit. But they weren't asking him how to get out of the septic tank of shit. They were asking him how to stop other people making waves. Okay. We do want to this is a conversation about ultimately getting out of the septic tank. However, my point I'm making is that this idea that I have to always have peace in my relationships for there to be peace on earth, I'm not, I don't believe in that because it's going to stunt our growth. It's going to stunt our capacity to see things, learn things, work through things, communicate better, etc., so that we can experience deeper connection, deeper love, deeper belonging. Um, Same goes for conflict. The reason that I married Christina was that we grew from conflict. Every conflict we had, we were better after it. Okay. It was one of the reasons that I was like, okay, I can do it with this one. I can do this thing called life with this one. um, because, geez, we fought a lot, but we were better after it. And it turns out we just had a lot and a lot of personal shit that was standing in our way of our ability to have a good relationship and a healthy relationship. And at that point, we met in a cult, guys. So we had also had a lot of spiritual conditioning and stuff that totally broke connection and created unsafety and shutting down everything in the relationship. Because we were told the opposite of this. You should never have a negative emotion. If you are, you're somehow failing and you've left God. That was the message I got. So I've kind of come quite a long way since the cult years. But one of the things the fundamental premise for bringing more peace to our relationships is first of all, don't put yourself to these ridiculously high standards that you should never argue, never have a conflict, never feel frustrated, never judge ever at all. That's just self-violent. Okay, it's just self-violent and actually limits our long-term ability to develop and learn to love deeper and connect deeper and see more of ourselves. But something we can do this week, like starting immediately, is simple. Recognize that there's not two people on this earth the same. There's not two people on this earth exactly the same. We've all had different upbringings, we've got different cultures and experiences and definitions of these cultures. We've got different beliefs, values, habits, preferences, opinions. We're unique. And please, if you haven't already, go back and watch Richard Abbott's replay in the expert interview section, when I talk to them about uniqueness, because we're meant to be unique. Unique is our strength, unique is our power, unique is how we have an amazing world, peace on earth. Okay. But we have to recognize that we're all completely different and drop the expectation of people understanding us first time round. You know, drop the expectation of them totally getting us without us really sharing enough of ourselves for them to even get us. There's a lot of assumptions that can go on, a lot of mind reading, a lot of like, if you, well, you should know me this about me by now. You might, if you're honest, you might have only discovered about you by now and you haven't even shared it yet or whatever. There's so many moving parts. But when I engage my relationship with my wife, for example, from the intent of I don't expect her to agree with me or be the same as me, is a lot more harmony. So you know how we got this is I don't know if she can hear me. Do you know not do you know that how I had this big fridge drama where I got this fancy fridge, but they stopped making the fridge front panels. Remember that? Last November it got delivered. Well, yesterday the new one got delivered. Finally, a year. I can hear it dinging, dinging, dinging at the moment because she's swapping the fridges over right now. The whole time I'm doing this conversation with you, it's been dinging in the background. You know, when you leave a fridge door open too long, it starts going, "Hey, I'm open." Anyway, so we hardly get it through. I had to actually unscrew a bit of, take the bit of the door off in order to get this fridge in this little cabin, and then we turn it on. It's so pretty, it's so beautiful. Yeah, and I go to open the door and it won't open because there's a wall there and this door open this fridge opens different to the other one. So first that's the first thing. But that's not what I was going to tell you. I've managed to fix that. But we wake up this morning and she's like, "Can you hear that sound?" I'm like, "What sound?" She's like, "There's a fan in the fridge. I can't live with that." And I'm like, "We've just spent a year, we spent a month looking for this fridge. It's just finally been delivered. It's a beautiful fridge, but it has a little fan in the front of it to keep the stuff in the door cool. And she doesn't like the humming noise." I promise you, I used exactly what I'm saying with you today, this morning. Because she's, "Can you hear that?" I'm like, "Not really." I can hear something, but if it's a problem for her, it's a problem for her. Does that make sense? There's no point in me trying to say, "Well, it's not a problem for me." And, you know, you shouldn't gaslighting her by saying she's somehow wrong for it to be a problem or whatever. Do you get my kind of point though? Like there was a lot more peace this morning when my expectation was she's different and I've committed to this woman and therefore my commitment is to do whatever I can that she's happy and at peace. And if that means getting a new fridge because this one hums a little bit, that's what we'll do. But my point is, it's like in that exchange, there was no part of me going, "Well, if it's not a problem for me, it shouldn't be a problem for you. If it's not a problem for me, it shouldn't be a problem for you." Does that make sense? That's the, when you totally get that everyone is different, so many assumptions can fall away, so many expectations can, so many things that cause conflict can fall away. And we're actually able to show up with people and witness their uniqueness and be fascinated by their uniqueness and their difference. And we actually get to witness them here and now and present. I've talked about it before. Notice the nowness in people. Notice the newness. Same. You get the same result. We leave all these expectations, all that baggage behind, and we meet them in the moment. See what that's like this week to really meet people in the moment. I guess the moral of the story today, and should probably talk about peace on earth at some point, but the underlying message is that we need to stop defining normal life as a problem. It's normal to have these emotions. I've tried to justify that and help us make that shift from resisting all these emotions to actually welcome them to explore. Yeah, what's the function? What's the purpose? What's the calling? What's it trying to? How can it help you? Why is it happening for you, not against you, etc., etc. But ultimately, there's a point where we need to stop defining normal life as a problem. And I heard that somewhere. I can't remember where, but I think it's such a powerful way of putting it. We got to stop defining normal life as a problem. And whatever your life happens to be, relatively consistently, is normal life for you. You know, I believe for peace on earth to happen, or for us to experience our earth as a peaceful place to live, we need to stop fighting the human experience. It's not the first time I've said this. I wrote a book about it. This little one here, Cam here. We need to stop fighting the human experience. We're all unique. We all have these emotions, and they can actually be helpful if we don't fight them and we actually breathe into them and let them be here and teach us, talk to us. What's my inner wisdom saying with this? But also, like, look at our life and go, I can focus all on what's stressing me and what I don't like and don't want and what I believe is wrong. But the world is just one big emotional mirror. That tends to perpetuate the more we tend to focus on what stresses us, what's wrong with us, what's wrong with life, or whatever. I just hope for you this Christmas that it can be a peaceful one. And by that, you can let life happen. You can let it happen. You can engage it. If something's a problem, you can do something about it, but you can at least let it appear for a few moments before you've judged the hell out of it and you're trying to make it put it back in its box. You know what I mean? It's already here. And the more we fight it, the more we suffer. And the more we fight it, I do believe at some level the outer reflects the inner. And our external world is going to reflect our inner conflict. How can we really expect the external world to be peaceful if we are fighting ourselves, fighting within ourselves, fighting our thoughts, fighting our feelings, fighting our body? How can we really expect it to ever show up there if we don't at least give it a go, mastering it within ourselves? There are wars and threats of wars. Despite there being plenty of food, there are people going hungry. And for some weird reason, the politicians do appear to be making many inhumane and apparently self destructive decisions. That does appear to happen in the world. But I also believe that the world exists to elevate us. It's constantly reflecting our own conditioning. The particular thing we have a problem with is reflecting our conditioning. You see, I could put 10 people in a room. We could all start talking about a certain world issue, but they would all have a personal reason why that's a problem for them. Does that make sense? It always ends up very personal. So we can be blaming these people over there or these things over there or whatever. But if you ask yourself, but what about this is the problem for me, really? You get back to what's getting triggered in you. That makes sense, you know? And I see that this whole elevation is a growth, but also a letting go. So we've got this old hair canister full of hairspray, and these world and earthly events are happening, and the button's being pressed. And if there's something in the can, there's going to be a reaction of some kind coming out of this can. Every moment, every day is offering opportunity for us to heal and transcend and see through our conditioning and our assumptions and our judgments and our expectations and our things that are limiting us or hurting us or harming us or whatever. It can all be a beautiful healing university almost. for us to be elevated, or it can pull us all. It can pull you down. Everything going on in the world just gets me down. I don't know if that is the healthiest relationship to have with it. And don't forget, the world is the context of our awakening. The world is the context of our awakening. I've said many times, but there are a few new members either watching this or the replay. I remember sharing, really struggling about what was happening in the world a while back, and I was talking to my friend about it, Narayan, and he said, "Don't forget, the world is the context of your waiting. The crazier it all becomes, the quicker we're all going to wake up. The crazier it all gets, the quicker we're all going to wake up." And I've really noticed that is really true. You know, a lot of people have woken up and are seeing what's really going on in the world ever since COVID, for example. Have you noticed that in different ways? It's like we need these wake up calls to give us some contrast, a bit like an alarm clock in the bedroom to stop us from sleepwalking through our life. And like I said before, I'm here to awaken. I'm here to not not just exist, but to really, really live, to feel alive. And as the famous proverb goes, and I'm going to quote this: "A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor." And the official kind of meaning of that little proverb is that people develop skills and resilience by facing challenge and adversity, which takes me back to my original point. We need to stop defining a normal life as a problem. And the attitude around here, and what we've been trying to convey for a number of years now, is one in which we stop fighting life, has a foundation in self awareness, has a foundation in knowing who you really are and knowing what this really is. But that's a topic for another day. But to have this idea that everyone has to be at peace for there to be peace on earth, it misses a little bit for me this whole idea that the world is existing to elevate. And what you see in someone else can reflect something in yourself that if that didn't exist out there, you would never have seen within yourself. You would never have seen it. If everything was really just our classical idea of nirvana out there, I think human evolution, spiritual awakening, and personal growth would quickly grind almost to a halt. So my goal today, although it's been a bit up and down, left and right, I don't know how it's been for you, if you enjoyed today, but my goal today was to not just do a classical conversation about peace on earth, not starting with you having, if there's peace on earth, it's on you. I think that is a quite a self-violent spiritual principle that is actually often used to keep people in their place, to pacify the human, to not have them stand up, say what they need to say, do what they need to do, and actually get out and genuinely make a better world. I think there's a double-edged sword to some New Age spirituality stuff that has actually pacified people on a very wide level, a very wide range of the population. Um, and I always just keep going back to that parable or the story or of Jesus turning the tables in the chapel or whatever, something like that. Remember that story? Peace on earth is beautiful. It's your beautiful desire. I think one of the most beautiful things we can do for peace on earth is to do what we did exactly right at the beginning of this conversation. Sit with it for a few moments with that intention. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be lovely? But for me, the absence of suffering is peace. And we can't really, really, really help anyone else find peace if we're still suffering in some way. or whatever. So there you go. Emotions are okay. They're actually the ones that we often fight are 100% necessary. And if you are feeling alone at any point during this festive season, remember it's a call from your heart to connect. It's a call from your heart to connect. There's many ways you can do that, but I would say do it like your life depends on it. And if your life isn't enough, then do it as if someone you care about's life depends on it. And you will find a way to answer that calling, and things may be different moving forward in that realm. There's definitely people out there that want to love you. Thanks for joining me for today's episode. Please like, subscribe, and write a review wherever you happen to be listening. It really does help to support me and this podcast. For more information about my one-to-one sessions, Calm Clan community, books and academy courses, head over now to minddetox.com.